King Charles had survived family divisions, public scandal, and years of private tension, but nothing prepared him for the file placed silently before him that morning. Inside was a palace staff account describing a secret meeting between Queen Camilla and Catherine, Princess of Wales, a meeting arranged without his knowledge, held behind closed doors, and centered on the future balance of power inside the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles stared at the first page without moving. A palace staff member had submitted a written account showing how Camilla requested a meeting with Catherine in a sitting room at Clarence House. The residence is the home used by the king and queen, but it had become the setting for a conversation kept away from William, private secretaries, and senior advisors. The secrecy made it dangerous. Camilla had not asked Catherine for comfort. According to the account, she wanted the princess to support a plan preserving her influence over royal appointments, household access, and ceremonial decisions after William became king. Royal appointments are positions given to trusted figures, while ceremonial decisions shape who appears, leads, and stands closest to the crown. Charles reached the line that changed everything. His wife had asked for the discussion to remain hidden from him until Catherine answered. The king removed his glasses, placed them on the desk, and read the sentence again. He did not raise his voice. He asked the courtier near the doorway why Camilla believed she could discuss the next reign without speaking to her husband. Catherine had refused. The staff record stated that she told the queen consort she could not promise anything on William's behalf or negotiate his future reign privately. A future reign means the period when the Prince of Wales becomes sovereign and gains authority over the royal household. Her answer protected him, but it also exposed the seriousness of the request. Camilla had planned the meeting through informal messages and chosen a time when Charles was occupied elsewhere. That discovery struck harder than the request. The monarch closed the file, pushed back his chair, and remained silent long enough for the courtier to feel the tension deepen. Then Charles gave the order. Bring Camilla to him immediately. Before she could explain, he wanted one answer first. Exactly what had she told Catherine? And did William already know? The secret meeting had wounded the king, but the deeper danger lay in the three people now forced to decide whether this was a misunderstanding, a betrayal, or the beginning of a royal power struggle. Behind the titles stood three people facing three very different fears. Charles feared betrayal from the woman closest to him. Camilla feared becoming powerless when the crown passed to the next generation. Catherine feared that one private promise could trap William's future reign before it had even begun. The meeting was secret, but the emotions behind it had been building in plain sight for years. Charles had spent years protecting Camilla's place beside him. He believed that stability inside their marriage would strengthen stability around the crown, the institution representing the sovereign and the authority of the monarchy. Every public defense, every carefully managed appearance, and every decision to keep her close had been built on trust. Now that trust had been shaken by a conversation she had deliberately hidden. Camilla felt time closing around her. During a private exchange recorded in an aide's written account, the Queen admitted that she feared being politely pushed aside once William became monarch. The Prince of Wales is the title traditionally held by the direct heir to the throne, and his eventual accession would give him control over royal households, advisors, and ceremonial planning. She feared that years of influence could disappear with one change of reign. Catherine carried a different burden. She had become central to the monarchy's future, because public confidence increasingly rested on her and William. Her growing role meant that even a private answer could carry enormous weight. She entered the meeting, believing Camilla wanted to discuss family unity. Instead, she discovered that the real subject was authority after the succession, the formal transfer of the crown from one sovereign to the next. Camilla asked whether the princess could persuade William to preserve several trusted household figures, and keep her involved in major ceremonial decisions. A royal household is the team of aides and officials who manage a senior royal's duties, schedule, and public role. The request sounded personal, but the consequences were institutional. It would allow the queen consort to shape the next reign before it had even begun. Catherine listened without interrupting. Then she placed her untouched teacup on the table and told Camilla she could not make promises on behalf of her husband or the future crown. The refusal was calm, but it landed like a verdict. The queen had asked for protection. The princess had answered with duty. Catherine left the room unsettled. She paused in the corridor, called William, and told him they needed to speak privately that evening. He heard the strain in her voice and immediately understood that something serious had happened. Charles still believed the secret meeting was the beginning of the crisis. He was wrong. Camilla's fear had started months earlier, during one humiliating ceremony that convinced her the future monarchy was already moving beyond her. To understand why the queen took such a dangerous risk, the story must return to the ceremony that made her feel she was already being replaced. The secret conversation did not begin at Clarence's house. Its true beginning came months earlier, inside a crowded royal ceremony, when a small change in protocol sent a devastating message. No argument followed. No accusation was made. Yet Camilla understood immediately that the center of gravity was shifting toward William and Catherine, and that when Charles was no longer sovereign, her own influence might disappear overnight. Camilla had already noticed the pattern. As Charles reduced parts of his public workload, more ceremonial duties moved toward William and Catherine. Those duties were not empty appearances. They signaled trust, visibility, and preparation for the next reign. Palace planners had also begun consulting the Prince and Princess of Wales on long-term decisions, because they represented the monarchy's future direction. The breaking point came during a major Commonwealth reception at Buckingham Palace. A Commonwealth reception is a formal royal gathering for representatives from nations connected through the Commonwealth. Camilla arrived expecting to lead the greeting line beside Charles. Instead, a last-minute protocol revision placed Catherine directly beside the king, while the queen consort was moved several positions away. Camilla kept her expression controlled, but the message cut deeply. Guests turned first toward Catherine and William. Conversations gathered around the younger couple. The princess appeared calm, while the future king carried himself with growing authority. In that moment, the queen felt the room responding not to the present monarchy, but to the one waiting behind it. Catherine sensed the tension but did not understand its depth. She followed the revised arrangement because palace officials had presented it as an approved decision. William noticed Camilla's silence afterward, yet he assumed she was irritated by protocol rather than frightened by what it represented. Camilla confronted a senior courtier once the reception ended. According to a documented staff account, she demanded to know who had authorized the change. The answer struck harder than the rearrangement itself. Charles had accepted it without objection. The king had not intended to humiliate her, but she heard only one thing: he had allowed Catherine to stand where she believed she belonged. That night, Camilla began privately asking what authority a queen consort retained after the death or abdication of a sovereign. A queen consort is the wife of a reigning king, holding status through marriage rather than independent ruling power. She soon learned that William could restructure households, remove advisors, redefine access, and decide which arrangements survived into his reign. Camilla sat alone after midnight, removed her jewelry, and studied the seating plan left on a side table. She circled Catherine's position with a pen, folded the page, and placed it out of sight. Charles noticed her withdrawal but mistook it for exhaustion. He offered comfort, and she gave him no explanation. Months later, that ceremony became her first defense. When he confronted her, and the moment he realized the secret meeting had not been a sudden mistake. The wound had started quietly, but once Charles summoned Camilla and Catherine into the same room, silence was no longer possible. There were no cameras, no advisors, and no carefully prepared statements when the three royals finally faced one another. Charles entered carrying the staff account. Camilla arrived defensive but composed. Catherine came last, aware that every word could affect both a marriage and a future reign. Then the king placed the file between them and asked the question no one in the room could avoid. Charles had ordered the meeting at Clarence's house and refused Camilla's request to include her personal secretary or legal advisor. A personal secretary manages a senior royal's official work, while a legal advisor protects their formal interests. The king wanted no shield between them. Catherine agreed to attend because she believed he deserved to hear the truth directly, not only through a documented staff account. Charles looked at his wife and asked why she had approached his daughter-in-law about the next reign instead of speaking to him. His voice stayed low. That restraint made the accusation feel heavier. Camilla answered that she had not been plotting against him. She insisted she was trying to prevent herself from becoming a burden or a source of conflict after the succession. The king slid the file across the table. Camilla did not touch it. She kept her hands still, while Catherine explained that the private discussion involved future appointments, household access, and ceremonial influence. Household access means permission to enter royal residences, offices, and private areas, while ceremonial influence shapes who takes part in major official events. Camilla finally admitted the first truth. She had asked Catherine to encourage William to keep two of her closest advisors in powerful palace positions after he became king. The queen consort said those figures understood her work and could protect continuity. Yet continuity now sounded dangerously close to control. Catherine then revealed the second request. Camilla had asked whether certain royal residences and private rooms could remain under her authority, regardless of William's future decisions. The princess spoke carefully, but the effect was immediate. Charles recoiled, rose from his chair, and walked away from the table as though distance might soften what he had heard. Charles turned back and asked whether his wife believed their marriage gave her authority over the next sovereign. Camilla's composure cracked. She said she feared the future king would erase everything she had built, remove the people she trusted, and leave her with nothing once the present reign ended. Catherine did not attack her. She answered with quiet force. Fear, she said, could not justify placing her between a father and his son. William's future decisions belonged to him, and no private promise could bind the crown before he inherited it. The room changed after that. Charles returned to the table, closed the file, and announced that every informal succession-related arrangement involving Camilla would be reviewed immediately. The confrontation shattered the secrecy, but it also activated the machinery of royal power, and the next decision would determine who truly controlled Camilla's future. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through access lists, household appointments, private briefings, property arrangements, and signatures placed at the bottom of carefully worded instructions. After the confrontation, Charles faced a brutal choice: protect his wife from humiliation or protect the future crown from promises made in secret. For the first time, those duties no longer pointed in the same direction. Charles ordered his private secretary to trace every conversation, request, and informal assurance connected to Camilla's position after the succession. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages a royal's official business and confidential decisions. The king wanted to know how far the planning had gone, who had been involved, and whether anyone had acted as though William's future authority could already be negotiated. William received the news in a closed briefing with Catherine beside him. His future household, the team that would support him when he became sovereign, had been discussed without his approval. The prince felt anger rise immediately, not only because his authority had been challenged, but because his wife had been approached alone and placed under pressure. Catherine watched him carefully. Before entering the next briefing, William paused outside the door, straightened his cuffs, and told her he would defend her without turning the crisis into revenge. she understood why that mattered. An open attack on Camilla would not only divide the family, it would deepen Charles's humiliation and make the crown appear driven by personal retaliation. Charles faced the same conflict from the opposite side. Publicly, he wanted to protect the Queen from disgrace. Privately, he knew that defending her without limits would weaken his own authority and damage the trust Catherine had shown by telling the truth. Love demanded mercy. Duty demanded a boundary. The review soon uncovered something colder. Camilla had already suggested names for a future advisory circle she hoped would survive beyond Charles's reign. According to a documented palace account, one advisor had drafted an informal continuity proposal. The proposal was a non-binding plan that would have granted the Queen ongoing consultation rights over selected charities, residences, and ceremonial traditions. Charles read the document in silence. He reached the paragraph describing permanent consultation, drew a firm line through it, and wrote one sentence beneath the page. No current household could bind a future sovereign. The decision was simple. Its meaning was not. William was then named as a required participant in every discussion concerning the next reign. An authorized representative, meaning someone formally chosen to speak on his behalf, would also be acceptable. Private negotiations through family channels were over. Camilla did not hear the decision from her husband. An official palace communication arrived instead. Charles had chosen the crown over private reassurance, and when that decision reached Camilla, the emotional cost became impossible to hide. The first consequence was not a public announcement, it was silence. Meetings disappeared from Camilla's diary. Advisors stopped entering through the private corridor. Calls that once came directly from senior offices were rerouted through formal channels. The Queen remained inside the royal household, yet she could feel the walls of influence closing around her, and she knew Charles had personally allowed it to happen. Camilla received the official notice before noon. It stated that every succession-related discussion had been suspended, and that her staff must now send future requests through the king's private office. Succession means the transfer of the crown from one sovereign to the next, and these discussions shaped who would hold influence when William eventually became monarch. Two advisors linked to the continuity proposal were also removed from strategic meetings, while the palace review continued. Camilla read the notice twice. Then she folded it once, placed it inside a drawer, and told her dresser to cancel every private engagement that afternoon. The decision was quiet, but it carried pain. She believed Charles had turned one fearful conversation into a judgment on her loyalty, and the Queen could not separate the official restriction from the personal rejection. Charles tried to reach her before evening. He asked to enter her rooms, but an aide returned with a simple message. She wished to be left alone. The king did not force the door. He walked away, knowing that they were now separated by more than anger. They were living inside the same residence, yet speaking through staff. Catherine received another written account later that day. A palace employee explained that the secret meeting had been documented because Camilla's requests seemed to move beyond personal concern and into constitutional pressure. Constitutional pressure means an attempt to influence how royal authority will operate under a future sovereign. The employee feared that a private family conversation was being used to shape William's future decisions. Catherine reached the final paragraph and stopped. The account recorded that Camilla had repeatedly asked whether she would keep the discussion from William until a private agreement was secured. She handed the page to him and admitted that the secrecy was more serious than she had first allowed herself to believe. William read every line. His anger returned, but he saw the strain in his wife and lowered his voice. The prince told her she had done nothing wrong. Catherine answered that refusing the request had been necessary, yet she could no longer ignore the fear driving the Queen's behavior. Charles sat alone at dinner that night, with Camilla's empty chair opposite him. He had protected the monarchy, but the cost now felt painfully personal. The palace had imposed consequences, But the real turning point would come not through authority, but through two women finally speaking without strategy or witnesses. The second meeting was nothing like the first. There were no hidden proposals, no careful questions about future power, and no attempt to secure a promise. Camilla arrived without notes. Catherine arrived without William. For the first time, the Queen stopped speaking, as a royal figure defending her position, and spoke instead as a woman terrified that the life she had fought to build would vanish the moment Charles was gone. Catherine had requested the conversation because she no longer believed files, restrictions, or formal palace instructions could repair the damage. They met at Windsor with no aides present, and agreed that nothing said would count as an official negotiation. Windsor is one of the monarchy's principal royal residences. But that afternoon, it became something simpler. Neutral ground for two women carrying different fears. Camilla spoke first. In a private conversation later recorded in Catherine's personal account, she admitted that the altered Commonwealth reception had changed everything. The Queen said that watching guests turn toward William and his wife made her feel irrelevant, while Charles was still on the throne. She had smiled through the evening, but inside, she believed the future had already begun replacing her. Catherine listened without interrupting. Camilla then confessed that her deepest fear was not losing ceremonies, advisors, or private rooms. It was losing every connection to royal life after losing her husband. Without Charles, she feared the palace would become a place where she was remembered, but no longer wanted. The confession changed the room. Catherine said she understood the terror of losing both a person and a place in the same moment. But she also explained that asking her to influence William had forced her into an impossible position. As a wife, she protected him. As a future queen, she also had a duty to the crown, the authority and responsibility carried by the sovereign. Camilla finally admitted why she demanded secrecy. She believed Charles would dismiss her fears as insecurity and tell her not to worry. The Queen had wanted certainty, not comfort. Instead, she had created the very suspicion she was trying to escape. Catherine then revealed something Camilla had never expected. William had prepared no plan to humiliate, remove, or erase her. According to a private discussion between the couple, the future king had intended to preserve her dignity while reviewing only the powers attached to the next reign. Camilla's composure broke. She gripped the arm of her chair and said she no longer knew whether Charles saw her as his partner or as a danger that needed controlling. Catherine offered no guarantee of future influence. She promised only dignity, respect, and fairness if the Queen stopped seeking authority through private pressure. Catherine returned to Charles carrying no document and no proposal. Only the truth Camilla had been too frightened to tell him herself. The battle over influence had ended, but Charles still had to decide whether truth had arrived soon enough to save the trust between them. Once the existence of the secret meeting reached the outside world, the story escaped palace control. It was no longer only about one marriage or one private request. It became a national argument about loyalty, succession, fear, and whether personal influence should survive the transfer of the crown. Every headline seemed to force Charles, Camilla, Catherine, and William into roles none of them had chosen. Palace communications officers confirmed that a private family discussion had taken place, but refused to reveal its contents. Their statement was meant to calm the situation. Instead, it made the silence louder. Palace communications officers are the officials responsible for protecting the monarchy's public message, and their refusal to explain the meeting convinced many people that the truth was more serious than first believed. Commentators split almost immediately. Some described Camilla's actions as the panic of a woman terrified of losing her place after Charles. Others called it an attempt to shape William's reign before he inherited the crown. Succession boundaries are the limits preventing one royal household from controlling the decisions of the next sovereign. And suddenly, those limits were being debated across the country. The story exploded the following morning. A major newspaper printed separate photographs of Charles and Camilla beneath one brutal headline: "The meeting he was never meant to know about." The words turned private pain into public judgment. By breakfast, the king's marriage was no longer being discussed as a relationship. It was being examined as a crisis of trust. Charles watched the coverage without speaking. He knew the public was now seeing fears Camilla had never managed to express honestly to him. Each report made her secrecy look colder, yet he understood the fear beneath it. That knowledge did not comfort him. It made the betrayal feel more tragic. Camilla refused to leave through the public entrance for a scheduled engagement. She could not face the cameras while strangers judged whether she was frightened, ambitious, or disloyal. The Queen cancelled her appearance and remained inside, knowing her absence would create another headline. Palace staff then clarified through a documented internal statement that Catherine had not exposed the meeting. The written account surfaced during a formal review after concerns were raised about pressure being placed on the future reign. That revelation protected the princess, but it also confirmed that the danger had come from inside the conversation itself. William told Catherine she must not feel guilty for protecting the future crown. She answered that protecting it should not require destroying a frightened person. The prince heard the sadness beneath her words and realized the crisis had wounded everyone. A small crowd gathered near Buckingham Palace. Some demanded transparency. Others held messages calling for reconciliation. The country had delivered its judgment in headlines, but only the king could deliver the verdict that mattered inside the monarchy. Charles did not end the crisis with punishment, exile, or a dramatic public declaration. He ended it by drawing a line between love and authority. Camilla would not be humiliated, but neither would she be permitted to negotiate control over the next reign. Catherine would not be blamed for refusing her request, and William's future crown would remain free from promises made in secret. Charles summoned Camilla for one final private conversation, after hearing Catherine's account of their second meeting. The palace review was complete, meaning the formal internal examination of staff records, private requests, and succession-related proposals had reached its conclusion. No evidence showed that the princess had acted disloyally or tried to expose the queen publicly. The king placed the original staff file on the table, but did not open it. He told his wife that he no longer needed to read what had happened. He needed to understand why she had believed secrecy was safer than trusting him. Camilla finally answered without defense. She admitted that she had feared losing Charles first, then losing her role, her home, her staff, and the identity she had built beside him. The Queen said she had mistaken uncertainty for rejection, and fear for proof that William intended to erase her. Charles listened, but he did not weaken the boundary. He told her that dignity could be protected, but influence could not be guaranteed beyond his reign. The crown belongs to the sovereign who inherits it, meaning the next monarch must remain free to choose advisors, households, residences, and ceremonial roles without secret promises made in advance. The decision was final. Every continuity proposal created outside official channels was cancelled. Camilla would retain her present position, her personal respect, and the protection owed to her as his wife. But William alone would decide future household appointments once he became king. Charles also formally cleared Catherine of wrongdoing. In a private conversation, he thanked her for refusing to make a promise that could have compromised both her husband and the monarchy. The princess had protected the future crown, even though doing so had placed her inside a painful family conflict. Camilla accepted the new boundaries. She agreed to dismiss the informal advisory proposal and apologized directly to William for trying to reach his future decisions through Catherine. The prince accepted that apology, but he made clear that no similar approach could ever happen again. Charles then reached across the table and took his wife's hand. The gesture did not erase the betrayal. It showed that their marriage would survive through honesty, rather than hidden arrangements. Camilla's fear had been human, but her secrecy had been wrong. Catherine's refusal had been painful, but necessary. Charles's devastation became the moment he separated his duty as a husband from his duty as king. There was no further secret to uncover, and no unresolved battle left behind. The crown emerged protected, the marriage endured, and the future monarchy remained free to choose its own path. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.